այսօր հյուրընկալել ենք Պաշտպանության պատասխանատվության համաշխարհային կենտրոնի ղեկավար Savita Pawnday-ին. Good day, Ms. Pawnday. Thanks for accepting the interview request. So the primary goal of the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect is to save lives by mobilizing the international community to act in situations where populations are at risk of mass crimes. Would you please speak in more detail about the activities of the center?
The Global Center was established in 2008, and our mandate is to raise awareness about situations where there is a risk of atrocities or where atrocities are already ongoing. And we do this through research and publication, which you have already seen that we have published a piece on Nagorno-Karabakh last week. And then based on the research and the analysis that we do, we also lobby member states, both at the UN Security Council, at the Human Rights Council, and different sort of intergovernmental bodies to make sure that action is taken to protect populations in a timely manner.
So as mentioned a few days ago, the center issued a statement regarding the humanitarian crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh created by Azerbaijan's illegal blockade. Since when has your center been following the worsening situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, and how would you assess it, Ms. Pawnday?
So we have been following the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh now for years. We followed sort of the outbreak of violence in November 2020 very closely. And you know, we have been following the blockade also very closely, looking at sort of the impact on civilians of a denial of humanitarian aid, life-saving medical supplies and food. So we have been, you know, continuously following the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. I have been engaging on this issue on Twitter. And, you know, last week we published this analysis basically talking about the fact that the blockade, if it leads to humanitarian hardship for a population of over 120 ethnic Armenians, then that, you know, that implies that there might be crimes against humanity or war crimes occurring. I mean, as you know, the intentional denial of humanitarian aid you know, is a crime against humanity. So in that context, we have been looking at the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, the situation for over 30,000 children there. And it's in this context that we have been following it. And we are hoping that the Azerbaijani government respects the order from the International Court of Justice and, you know, lifts the blockade so that the harm that the civilians and the hardship that the civilians are facing in Nagorno-Karabakh is relieved a little bit.
So in the statement, you mentioned that the Azerbaijani authorities should immediately open the Lachin corridor and ensure free and safe access for the civilians and goods through the corridor, as well as guarantee humanitarian access in accordance with international law and decision of the International Court of Justice. If Azerbaijan refuses to fulfill even the legally binding decisions of the International Court of Justice, what steps should the international community take in this case?
I think that, you know, in most situations like this, we really sort of, our job is to pressure other, you know, regional organizations, the United Nations mechanisms, as well as the Human Rights Council and the UN Security Council to make pronouncements on these particular situations. So that's what we will continue to do, that, you know, the messaging is relayed to Azerbaijan that this is the blockade is against international law. It's against the order which has been given by the International Court of Justice. And I mean, as you know, recently the Council of Europe has also asked for a creation, I mean, has created a mechanism to investigate the humanitarian situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. So I think that all of these different steps will put the right kind of pressure. And I believe that, you know, this will have the impact that will lead to the breaking of the blockade. And you know, it's not only just the international civil society, but I think the Armenian civil society has done a fantastic job in terms of constantly talking about the issue, in constantly raising the plight of the 120 civilians in Nagorno-Karabakh. So I just, encourage the Armenian civil society, the Armenian government, as well as, you yourself, the members of the press, to continuously bring attention to this issue. And I'm sure that it's going to be resolved. That is my hope, because we really feel for all of those people who are suffering because of, families have not been able to see each other. I'm sure students are stuck in Armenia, their families are back in Nagorno-Karabakh. I'm sure the medical supplies are dwindling, and that is really, it brings the unnecessary hardship on innocent civilians who have not done anything to anybody. So I really hope that this kind of international pressure really, compels the government of Azerbaijan to lift the blockade.
Ms. Pawnday, anyway, during the last period, many international actors, organizations, structures, and also political leaders have issued calls and statements condemning the actions of Azerbaijan. But all this has not had any impact, any positive impact on the humanitarian situation of 120,000 Armenians who have been under siege for 8 months. Are we not witnessing the failure of the implementation of R2P, the responsibility to protect? That is the principle of the international law today.
Yes. So, I think that you're absolutely right. We have seen a lot of condemnation. I think that right now what we are seeing is the statement from the Secretary General, the recent statement from special rapporteurs who have come together and issued a statement which is again condemning the actions of Azerbaijani government. I really hope that, the major powers in the region also come together and really pressure the Azerbaijani government, because there are not a lot of options on the table, in terms of, none of us want this situation to escalate even further. So I really hope that the pressure, that the momentum that is building right now, we released a statement last week, and then we have also seen multiple other intergovernmental organizations sort of seizing on this moment and bringing the situation to the fore. So I hope that this condemnation really urges the Azerbaijani government, and I really hope that the regional powers also come together to resolve the situation. But I totally understand your frustration that it's been 7 long months and we don't see an end to it. So, of course, there's a lot of concern.
And in your opinion, what other mechanisms can be used in this situation to restrain Baku?
I think that, it's really, really important that we have recently seen that the Council of Europe has created a mechanism to investigate the humanitarian situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. In many cases, having an independent assessment done by an international body sometimes helps in bringing the truth forward. I'm not saying that we already don't know the truth, but also to sort of clarify the facts of the situation. So I really hope that all of these different mechanisms can really help in bringing for the plight of civilians. At this point, it's really sort of, even for advocates who work on these kinds of situations where we see populations suffering, we have the order from the International Court of Justice. We have different, we very clearly see that this is violation of international law. And in spite of that, we are not seeing, regional powers and members of the UN Security Council coming together and sort of condemning this action. So I think that also speaks to the situation in the world right now that we are living in, that, the suffering of people has been ignored. This is also the case in many different situations that the Global Center covers, from Myanmar to Ethiopia to Sudan. It's very hard to garner that international attention, and we are living, unfortunately, in this period. So I'm just hoping that organizations like mine, we will continue to shine light on the situation, and we hope that, we are able to move and get some action which leads ultimately to the removal of the blockade.
And
I think that also, finally, I would just like to say that it's also about not just the blockade. The blockade is a symptom of the problem. I think that we need a comprehensive, peaceful solution to the whole issue of Nagorno-Karabakh.
And what refers to your center, Ms. Pawnday, what steps have been taken by your organization in the direction of ensuring international consolidation on the issue of preventing the humanitarian disaster in Nagorno-Karabakh?
So, I mean, to be very, sort of now splitting hairs, like we are an organization which monitors and evaluates the situation from a perspective of whether crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide, or ethnic cleansing is taking place in a very particular situation. We don't really assess a humanitarian situation because that is sort of the purview of humanitarian organizations. With Nagorno-Karabakh, we have looked at how the blockade is affecting people. And when you intentionally or illegally, stop the supply of humanitarian aid, that can be, construed as a war crime or crimes against humanity. So we have been looking at the Nagorno-Karabakh situation from that perspective.
And what steps are planned in this direction? In the future?
As I said before, we will, continue to follow the situation very, very closely. In addition to Nagorno-Karabakh, I think that, the other situation where we see a huge amount of denial of aid, very intentionally is also Syria. We also see the same situation play out in Myanmar. So with all of these different situations, we are closely monitoring them, and we are monitoring them from the perspective of how denial of humanitarian aid can really, lead to suffering of people, and how we have to, stop this violation that people of Nagorno-Karabakh and elsewhere in the world are right now experiencing.
And finally, what will be your message to the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh who have been under siege for 8 months?
I mean, I'm so humbled that you're asking me to give any message to some very brave people who have been suffering for the last 7 months. There's not much that I can say, but all I can say is that, I will keep trying, and the Global Center will keep trying to bring the spotlight of what they are experiencing right now. I hope that I will continue to work with Armenian civil society, the Armenian government, to make sure that, we do our utmost to end this blockade. And, my best wishes to everyone there. But, it's a very humbling moment when I'm asked to give any kind of messaging, because I cannot imagine the suffering that they are going through. And, I can only empathize as a human being and as somebody, who has a family and loved ones. So thank you for giving me this chance to speak directly to the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. I admire your courage, and I really hope that the situation gets resolved very, very soon.
Thanks for the interview, Ms. Pawnday.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
Այսօր հյուրընկալել էինք Պաշտպանության պատասխանատվության համաշխարհային կենտրոնի ղեկավար Savita Pawnday-ին։ Հաջողություն։